I'm going to give you two examples and I'll go through how to set up the FM3 to accept MIDI from the Airstep, and we'll also go into depth on how I've set up the Airstep using the Airstep app to program all the functions that I want. The first example is my live preset with the FM3 that I use with my band Ragdoll. It's actually pretty straightforward. The basis of everything is a high gain rhythm guitar sound that I've got on scene 1. So if I take that and move over to scene 2, which I've got set up to be the second foot switch on the Airstep, and the Airstep light is actually mirroring this. We'll get into that in a second. So this is scene 2. Massive multi-delay on there, and then I've got basically my dry scene but with a rhythmic delay on scene 3, which I've assigned to button number 3 on the Airstep. But I've also got tap tempo over here, which I can tap in on the Airstep and then play along, and my delays are all synced. So that's how I'm switching everything. I've also got button number 4 on the Airstep set up to toggle the tuner on and off. And that's everything that I need live for a Ragdoll gig. So that's what's going on there, but it's also all being mirrored on this particular controller here, which is connected via Bluetooth to the main Airstep. So I can press button number 1 and get scene 1, press button number 2 and get scene 2, press button number 3, get scene 3, toggle the tuner on and off, and I've also got tap tempo. So these two controllers essentially are doing exactly the same thing, and what I've been doing is basically setting up the FM3 behind me with the Airstep, the main one in front of it, connected via Midi like you see over here, and then I've just been using this to switch my scenes. The only downside is I also do like to use a wah live, so I've also kind of been experimenting with whether I want to have this just at the front of the stage or maybe in a different location for when I'm walking around and I can still get to my scene changes, and then when I need the wah, I can move over to this rig where I've got my scenes and then my expression pedal. Furthermore, on the FM3, I can also set up the onboard buttons to do a bunch of different functions. I don't really need it for this particular setup, but I will show you another preset. And to get to that preset, what I'll do is I'm going to press the little button back here. It will switch over to another preset, which you can see mirrored on the app. And this is a slightly different combo preset now, where this is going to be scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, tuner and tempo. So essentially we've got 8 buttons there. I'll just put this one, where am I going to put it? I'll put it off to the side so you won't be able to see it, but I will bring it up when I switch with it. And I'll bring up a different preset that I've got with 8 different scenes, which you can see right here. So let's test this. We're going to get into the breakdown in a second. Scene 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, tuner, and I've got tap tempo over here. Now, the way I would use this setup is mostly when I'm playing at home, so I've got all the buttons set up in front of me. What I'm going to do is move over to an effects layout on the FM3, so I can actually turn on and off individual effects from here. Then I've got my 8 scenes, which you might be able to see that controller back down there. So what I could do is, let's say I wanted scene 2 or scene 3, which is my stereo tape delay scene. I could then say add on the mega tap delay to that. So I'm using a combination of switching scenes and switching individual effects on and off there. All right, you've seen the examples, you've seen what you can do. Let's actually go through and program this. The first thing you need to do is go to your FM3 and let's go to setup, and we will come down to MIDI and remote. We're then gonna make sure we're on MIDI channel number 1 right here, and we are going to scroll all the way across because I'm using scenes for all of this. You can see what I've done. I have set up the relevant MIDI CCs. So the FM3 actually has to know what to listen to from the Airstep for the relevant functions. I've set the tap tempo over here to read from MIDI CC 33. The tuner is on 32. And down here, the scene select I've set on MIDI CC number 34. That's all we really need from the FM3. So I can exit out of that. Then I'm on my iPad at the moment. Let's go back over to, actually we don't need to do that. Let's just live on this one. This is the combo setup. So you can see I've got scenes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the top, 6, 7, 8 on the bottom. Say, let's just edit scene 3. It's basically the same process for all of this. I've got this set up not to be toggling. And essentially you can see the output interface is going to all the MIDI outputs on there. It's kind of redundant. I'm only using the one MIDI output there. The MIDI channel is set to number 1. The CC number is set to 34. So that's scene select. And then the actual CC value I have set to 2. So if we have a look at, say, scene number 1, it's going to be a very similar setup, but the CC value is 0. So if I say, hey, MIDI CC number 34, a value of 0, the FM3 is going to switch to scene 1. If we wanted scene 2, well, basically the same setup, just a different CC value. I've got CC value number 1, and that's the same on all 8 scenes over there. Then the tuner, I've set this up as a toggling foot switch. So check this out. If you have a look at the settings here, remember the tuner was set to MIDI CC 32. When I'm on CC value 127, that means the tuner is going to be off. When it's on CC value 0, so the other toggle value, the tuner is going to be on. So it is the same CC number, but the values are toggling between the extremes, and that lets me switch the tuner off, or I should say on, and then switch it back off. Very similar kind of setup happening with the tap tempo. In this case, I don't actually even have to have it as a toggle switch. I've just got the CC value to be number 33. I can basically set it to any CC number. I've just set it to 0 to keep it simple. One thing I like on this Airstep Lite app, just the Airstep app, this is the Airstep Lite, is the first 2 CC values available are 0 and 127. That's a really small little ergonomic thing, but it means you don't have to go 0 and then scroll all the way through when you want those toggle functions. So that is the combo thing that I've got set up for these big presets with 8 scenes. I can go over to my other preset, which was number 5 over here. And this was for my live preset, basically just 3 scenes. Let's go back over to that live preset because there's actually a few kind of little treats that I've got on here. So let's have a look at the setup here. You can see that the Airstep and the Airstep Lite controls are just mirroring one another. I've set them up to be exactly the same. Let's have a look at, say, scene number 2. If I select that, you can see that I've actually got 2 MIDI messages here. I've got message number 1, so that when I press the foot switch, when I release it and come back off, it's going to send the MIDI message out, and it's sending CC number 34. So select a scene, and the CC value is number 1. That's saying select scene 2. But if I do a long press over here, you can see I've got that set up to select scene number 5, which is like a lo-fi thing. And I don't have it labeled over here on the FM3, but if I do it on either of these controllers, you can see number 2 would be my lead scene. But if I hold it down, it's going to go to scene 5, and there's like a lo-fi scene. You know what, I'll do that again. I'm gonna put the light down at my feet so that I can actually switch that. So I can actually give you a proper example of how I would use this. So I've got that lo-fi scene for a very particular part of one song, and then I'm gonna press the main scene so that I get that switch happening. Something like that anyway. One thing that I haven't explored here that I will do in an in-depth video on the Airstep is that if you're using something like a set list manager on your iPad, or you've got lyrics or chords or some kind of sheet music there, you can also set up the various MIDI outputs, for example, the physical MIDI on the Airstep to go to your FM3 and say, hey, change to scene 3. And when it changes to scene 3, the Bluetooth function could go to your iPad or your tablet and turn the page. Or if you've got a live stream set up and you've got multiple cameras, each scene command from the Airstep, saying scene 1, 2, 3 or something like that, could select between each of the cameras. So you could have your main rhythm guitar camera, you'd have a close-up lead guitar camera, and I don't know, an overhead or an alternative shot or something like that. So there's some pretty cool things that you can do when using this in combination. But this video is totally designed just to give you the basics of using the Airstep essentially as like a sidecar for your FM3 when playing live. Like I said, it will also work with any other Fractal product you like, or if you've watched this and you're using a different modeler or some kind of old rack mount effect, the same principles will apply. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to ask in the comments. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there are links to my music and my Patreon in the video description. Stay safe, be excellent to one another. I'll see you all next time.